Now we make the circle of the upper part, the circumference of the upper part.
20.
No, 35.
35 is the diameter. Here, then I will point out that the master who, with the same system of diagonals, is marking the different points of the circumference of the upper plate.
It's not the title of a movie. But what does it represent? A warning? A wish? It is certainly an endangered figure. One cannot fail to take note of his extraordinary ability, but does it make sense today on the threshold of 2000? What arcane patent does it hold? Certainly not the way to trace the circle or shape the stone. Accepting the advice of a great master of architecture, and taking a look at the automotive industry, we can easily realize that a robot would be better. Or perhaps the manual processing of stone is part of a tribal rite. Moreover, already desecrated by the presence of a wall made with modern materials? And then we are sure that the young Trullo will not arouse the wrath of the elderly, though still emblazoned even if restored? Does the cultural value of the Etria Valley really depend on the particular shape of its houses? Or rather from their distribution on the territory? Has the problem been addressed? How? In 1980 the Puglia Region committed 100 young people from the former Law 285 for the census, cataloging and restoration of the Trulli of the Etria Valley. An attempt was made to treat the Trullo in the same way as any building. The attempt to census them with the help of cards 1 to 25,000 of the IME. And to detect them with traditional methods, what results has it had? A very small group operated with photogrammetry. The census was experimented with the aid of aerial photogrammetric surveys. Thematic orthophotos have been proposed. The validity of the photogrammetric survey, at a short distance, for cataloging has been demonstrated. May 1981 an exhibition conference was organized. The exhibition was joined by a photogrammetry laboratory with a sector for photo interpretation and stereorestitution. The experts could have become aware of the methodology adopted. It was like opening a library among the illiterate. 4 years later, an agreement between the University of Bari and the Puglia Region laid the foundation stone for a regional cultural heritage documentation center. The indicated location, the monumental complex of Santa Scholastica. It appears ideal for the didactic role that the center itself will have to play in the initial phase. The research program, annexed to the agreement. It allows a glimpse of a structure open to any technological innovation. The cultural good, understood in the broadest sense of the word, can be detected in a very short time, from the general to the particular. In the laboratory, it can be analyzed, dismembered into its fundamental elements and cataloged. The architect, or the urban planner, will be able to design his own intervention no longer on the white sheet of paper, but on updated photographic reliefs of the territorial reality. The idea of a geostationary satellite, intended to provide any information on the transformations of territorial reality in real time, should not arouse skepticism. But, in order for all this to be possible, some dogmas need to be reviewed, starting with the survey and the building design. What is meant by relief? A graphic image? A three-dimensional photographic image, in the desired but static scale? Is all this sufficient to facilitate the reading of what our ancestors transmitted to us through cultural heritage? Is a cartography, even if faithful, which support to the representation of the master plan, sufficient? Are the reliefs, which continue to be attached to the restoration projects, sufficient for viewing the project itself?
I find particularly emotional and, at the same time, solicitor, the image, recently seen, of the boys, who find themselves engaged in a job that, in effect, puts them in contact with tools and with operations that seem to be of the future, yet they also present themselves as a game. I believe that it is a fundamental task of the region, and for it of the Department of Culture, to set up, as we are trying to do, an activity that takes place between the region itself and the university, so that it can first of all give us a body of staff particularly prepared to use the new devices, and therefore also to become instructors of these very young, and I believe that the Santa Scholastica complex, its equipment, the men who are already passionately engaged in it, will be able to give us a quick start, essentially put this great project on the road. Starting with the cultural censuses, and among these the environmental goods must be included, and proceed with a cataloging of the same with characters of stringent uniformity, and with the qualification necessary for the use of particularly suitable and sophisticated equipment, and therefore open, and to the training of a category of young teachers. And also to the civil community, which must be able to find, in the context of this operation, the opportunity to also change its behavioral ways. I think, for example, of the private designer, too, who will be able to draw, through the institution, to which we await, the opportunity to no longer design at the table, and therefore, in essence, in the absence of a clear vision of the location of what who designs, and therefore also of his setting, instead will be able to design, having in mind how his project will fit into the whole of the existing, and also precisely in the natural environment in which he is going to be placed. This is a project of great ambition. We must, however, keep in mind that we are on the threshold of 2000, and we must bear in mind that a degraded reality, such as that in general of southern Italy, but in particular as regards our action Puglia, must find, precisely on the occasion of the technological revolution, the way to overcome these differences, and to reach new forms of insertion in the most advanced degree that has been achieved in Europe and, I would say, in the world. I speak of cultural goods and environmental goods, taking firmly what results, and from the regional legislation itself and from the recently issued Galasso decree, that is, the environment is itself a cultural asset, not only as we understand it as that environment particular, which had its relevance in the context of a placement of human groups in antiquity, the Pulo of Molfetta or Altamura, the Zingiuliusa or other caves that take us back to prehistoric times, but I also speak of the environment, which has become, which I say, patrimony of all the Apulians, as it has passed through our poetry, our literature.
The images, just seen, are extremely interesting, and in any case they pose a series of problems, of questions, which certainly cannot be answered today. However, it is to be hoped that, in light of some experiments, that we, as the Department of Culture, have in progress, it is possible to give an answer in a year, in 2 years. Here we are not setting limits, but let's say in a time that is not extremely long. The initiatives to which I refer are therefore, in my opinion, of extreme interest. 1. Concerns the identification of some new professional figures. In fact, for about a year, we have brought to the attention of regional administrators some extremely new figures. I am referring, in particular, to photogrammetric operators, cultural analysts, cultural designers, that is, to people who will have to deal in particular with the cataloging and documentation of cultural heritage, also using the photogrammetry technique. It is clear that these operators, in connection, in coordination with each other, they will thus be able not only to document a cultural asset, but also to propose necessary interventions. And I speak, in particular, of the analyst and even more of the cultural designer. Therefore, I said, the interventions for the protection, enhancement and recovery of the asset itself. In addition to this element of novelty, there is another, of particular interest, and it is practically all that concerns the legislation for the survey, because, currently, we cannot say that all the designs, which we receive, which are produced, on a relevant level, they contain a series of useful elements, also for the future. In this sense, as department, we are also conducting an experiment that allows, also through the use of the photogrammetric technique, the start of a regulation for the survey. The results are clear today. We do not know them yet, because we are right at the beginning, but we hope, from here to a year, to be able to continue what we have just started today.